I'd like to start with this question. What is your response to the president's assertion that he might use active duty military personnel in American cities?
Well, I'm almost sure he's woofing. He's not going to do it. He knows it would be a political disaster. From a military point of view, it's uniformly, both Secretary Esper and the chairman of the JCS have adamantly opposed the employment of active duty military forces. The National Guard, under state governor control, is a different thing to back up law enforcement. There's absolutely zero requirement to deploy combat units of the U.S. Armed Forces into the streets of America.
So under these circumstances, why bring it up? Why talk about dominating the battlefield? Why talk about domination in general?
He's an ignorant, lawless man. That's the only explanation. He's being told in a very straightforward manner by the senior military leadership and by Secretary Esper, who reiterated this morning, this is not an appropriate use of military power. What we're seeing is a nationwide spasm of anger over racial injustice and the murder of a restrained, unresisting Black man. And so that's the issue at stake. And then when it comes to the looting and the arson, that's a responsibility of local law enforcement backed up by the state police and or the National Guard if the governor so chooses. So this is a pouring kerosene on the fire. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's scared. He's starting to unravel on us, in my judgment, in public.
Well, let's talk about that a bit more. Yesterday, in a tweet, you wrote, General Milley, an officer of extraordinary competence and integrity, trapped by a photo op. But this is the part I wanted to ask you about. You said, they will obey the law, Trump lawless, a threat to our democracy, very dangerous times. Can you please expand on that? Who is they? They will obey the law.
Well, I think, look, a lot of Americans don't understand this. The armed forces are under the control of two civilians, that's it. The President of the United States under his role as Commander-in-Chief and the Secretary of Defense. Chairman of the JCS commands nobody, can't give orders to the armed forces, can't move forces from one theater to another. So this is civilian control of the armed forces. They're backed up by a Washington, D.C. intergovernmental legal establishment that tries to make sense out of the appropriate laws. In this case, it's primarily the Posse Comitatus Act, which says, 1879, the U.S. Armed Forces will not conduct domestic law enforcement, don't arrest Americans, don't collect evidence unless the president declares an emergency, in which case they do. And it happened the last time in 1992 in Los Angeles. So I think the bottom line is the country should have confidence that the armed forces will speak frankly to the President of the United States. But now the role of constraining Mr. Trump belongs to the Congress, the court system, the media, and the voters. But I don't think they should worry about the armed forces 7 days in May, that kind of thing. It's not going to happen. It's nonsense.
Can you explain the Insurrection Act to us? And is it possible that the federal government would act on that unilaterally?
Well, it's a political question. The 1807 Insurrection Act empowers the president when he calls on the insurrectionists to disperse, to take action unilaterally, whether the governor wants it or not. And by the way, the U.S. Armed Forces, and particularly the Guard, but the active military, under emergency declaration, have done all sorts of things. They went into Hurricane Katrina to save New Orleans and to organize the effort. They deliver the mail in the past. They have a range of potential actions, including in the 60s, suppressing violent outbreaks that overwhelmed the police. That's not the case today, but there's certainly ample historical precedent for the president to use active forces. The question is it a good idea? The answer is no.
I'd like you also to let us know if you have any visibility into what former and current military leaders might be saying to Secretary Esper and the president at this time about this matter.
Well, look, I'd never speak for the active military. Again, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman of the JCS, Mark Milley, a guy of tremendous capability, a very tough, responsible Princeton grad, big national hockey player. He's a terrific officer. He's in a very difficult position dealing with this president of the United States, who essentially veers into lawless directions at the whim. But we know from news reporting that both Secretary Esper and General Milley have strongly advised not to deploy federal forces. By the way, they haven't been deployed. They've been moved into the area. They've been given alerts. But the dispersal of that peaceful crowd in Lafayette Square was done by federal law enforcement backed up by the DC Guard. That was not active U.S. military forces.
There were guys out in tactical gear yesterday who identified themselves only as being responsive to the DOJ, and they would not otherwise identify what their command was, what their mission was, or who they were specifically. How do you feel about that?
Those were DC National Guard. And by the way, the state guards can also incorporate other guard units under their governor district control. The district's an unusual situation where the president is, in essence, the prime political authority for the district. The government, it's sort of complicated. The district operates under a sort of a limited authority, unlike the governor of Maryland, of Virginia, joining states. So those are state guard forces. They are authorized under the governor or district control to carry out law enforcement duties. Once they become federalized, the answer should be no.
Don't we have some expectation that they would answer who they are and what they're doing there? I'm just concerned that there is, with the kind of talk of especially around this idea of domination, when people are already at a bit of a fever pitch, is going to disrupt the trust and the faith that we need between our military and our civilian population.
Well, I couldn't agree more. It's a very dangerous situation in terms of the most respected institution, bar none, in the United States, in every poll is U.S. Armed Forces, with good reason. Again, those were military police units of the District of Columbia National Guard. The person in charge of dispersing peaceful protesters was the Attorney General, Mr. Barr. So this is not, again, the U.S. active armed forces being involved yet in domestic law enforcement. I think the president does have the legal authority, if he asserts it, to do just that. I don't think he's going to do it because I think he's pouring kerosene on the flames of a fire. But he's doing it deliberately, I might add.